The story begins in 1975 with a young Jean Grey riding in a car with her parents, John and Elaine. While using her powers to change the radio station, Jean suddenly hears overwhelming voices in her head. She screams for them to stop, which causes Elaine, who is driving, to lose focus and accidentally steer into the path of a truck. This leads to an accident that sadly claims Jean's parents. Miraculously, Jean is found safe and unharmed in the wreckage. At the hospital, Jean meets Charles Xavier, who comforts her and explains that she possesses a unique gift. He assures her that how she chooses to use it is up to her. Charles then brings Jean to his school for gifted youngsters, offering her a safe space to learn how to use her abilities for good. Fast forward to 1992, the Space Shuttle Endeavour is launched, but soon becomes trapped in what appears to be a solar flare. The president contacts Charles to rescue the stranded astronauts. Raven, also known as Mystique, leads the X-Men team, Jean, Scott, Hank, Storm, Kurt, and Peter, into space for the mission. Upon reaching the shuttle, Kurt and Peter teleport on board, using Peter's speed to gather the astronauts and bring them to the X-Wing. However, one astronaut reveals that their commander is still trapped. Although Raven suggests returning to Earth, Charles insists on rescuing everyone. Kurt teleports with Jean to retrieve the commander. Jean uses her powers to shield the shuttle from the flare, but it engulfs her entirely. She absorbs the energy and survives the ordeal. Kurt teleports her back to the X-Wing, and the team returns to Earth, celebrated as heroes for their successful mission. Upon returning to the Academy, Charles cancels the remaining classes for the day. Raven takes the opportunity to confront him, expressing her concerns about how the students are constantly being put in harm's way during these missions. She accuses Charles of being more focused on the recognition the X-Men have received since their victory over Apocalypse than on their safety. Meanwhile, a trio of spacecraft land near a quiet lake house where a dinner party is underway. A woman named Margaret steps outside when her dog begins barking at something unusual. She is approached by 3 extraterrestrial beings from the Dabari race. They attack Margaret and her dog, with their leader, Vuk, assuming Margaret's appearance. Disguised as Margaret, Vuk returns to the dinner party and eliminates everyone present. Later, she meets with other Dabari aliens, who are also in human disguises. They discuss the solar flare, having tracked its energy to Jean. At the Academy, Hank conducts a scan of Jean's energy levels and is alarmed to find them abnormally high. Whatever happened during the mission appears to have significantly amplified her powers. Jean reassures everyone that she feels fine and joins Scott outside to celebrate with the students. As the others enjoy themselves, Raven confides in Hank about her desire to leave the Academy and start a new life together. However, Hank believes they should remain. Scott tries to lighten Jean's mood, mentioning that the students have nicknamed her Phoenix after the space mission. But as they gather around the campfire, Jean begins to feel unsettled. The fire triggers something within her, causing her powers to spiral out of control. A sudden energy surge sends everyone flying backward, leaving Jean unconscious. Charles, Hank, and Raven use Cerebro to delve into Jean's mind. There, they uncover that Charles had suppressed Jean's memory of the car accident to shield her from the trauma and guilt. However, this discovery also reveals an unfamiliar voice echoing in Jean's thoughts. This presence stirs her awake, and she realizes that her father is alive. Enraged by the revelation that Charles lied to her, Jean forcibly disconnects him from her mind. Later, Scott visits Jean's room to check on her. Distraught and unable to control her emotions or her powers, Jean expresses her fear of hurting him or anyone else. She tells Scott she wants to find her father. When Scott tries to stop her, Jean uses her powers to render him unconscious and leaves to search for her father. Jean returns to her old neighborhood, where she finds John alive and living alone in their former home. He invites her in, and as he goes to get her a glass of water, Jean notices that his home is filled only with pictures of himself and Elaine, with no trace of her. Jean then peers into John's mind and discovers a memory of him willingly giving her up to Charles, blaming her for Elaine's death. He bitterly claims that the day Elaine died was the day Jean and his world died too. Furious, Jean's anger surges, but before she can act, the X-Men arrive to bring her back and offer their help. She knocks John unconscious, steps outside, and faces them. Charles pleads with her to return, promising help, but Jean refuses. Scott desperately tries to change her mind, and the arrival of the police further agitates her. In a fit of rage, she unleashes her powers, wreaking havoc on the officers. The X-Men attempt to stop her. Hank fires a tranquilizer, but Jean's speed is too much for Kurt or Peter to catch. In the chaos, Peter is severely injured. Raven steps forward, hoping to calm Jean, but as soon as she touches her, Jean releases a blast that sends Raven crashing into broken wood. Raven is impaled, and though Hank tries to help, it's too late. The X-Men bury Raven, mourning their loss. Hank accuses Charles of being responsible for what Jean has become, blaming him for Raven's death as well. Later, Charles is denied help by the president's staff when he seeks assistance. Vuk and her associate, Jones, arrive at the ruins of the neighborhood. Vuk confronts John, demanding information about Jean. When he hesitates, she kills him. Jean travels to Genosha, where she finds a mutant sanctuary led by Eric. Desperate to learn how to control her destructive powers, Jean turns to Eric for guidance, sharing the details of what happens when she loses control. Eric asks about the blood on her clothes, but Jean refuses to explain. Soon after, a military team arrives on the island. The captain demands that Eric give up Jean, blaming her for the earlier destruction of the police. Jean, angered, attempts to kill the soldiers by pulling the blades of their helicopter toward them. But Eric manages to hold them off long enough for the soldiers to escape unharmed. Eric orders Jean to leave, and she flies into the sky. Vuk enters a bar and encounters Jean, who has disguised herself as an old man. Vuk convinces Jean to join her and takes her to a hideout with the other Dabari. There, Vuk shows Jean a projection of the events that gave her powers. The Dabari had been tracking the energy source that destroyed their planet and witnessed Jean absorbing it. Vuk manipulates Jean into believing that the X-Men will try to destroy her, as they cannot control her. Hank flies to Genosha to ask for Eric's help. He tells him that Jean killed Raven, which is enough to convince Eric to hunt Jean down and kill her. Eric is aided by another telepathic mutant, Selene, who tracks Jean's location to New York City. Scott, Storm, and Kurt approach Charles after learning that Eric and Hank are going after Jean. Despite Charles not wanting them to pursue her, they go against his orders, and he has no choice but to join them. They head to NYC, where Eric, Hank, Selene, and another mutant, Ariki, arrive to kill Jean. Despite Charles's attempts to convince them to stop, both mutant groups clash in the streets, causing panic among civilians. Selene pulls Kurt away as he tries to teleport into the building where Jean is hiding. Eric makes his way inside, but his attempt to kill Jean fails when she tightens his helmet and breaks it into sharp pieces that pierce him, knocking him unconscious. With Storm's help, Charles fights off Selene and Ariki to enter the building. Jean manipulates Charles's body to walk upstairs to confront her, but Charles apologizes for tampering with her mind and allows her to look into his memories. He shows her the moment when John gave her up to Charles, and despite everything, he never gave up on her. This helps Jean reconnect with her good side. She chooses to relinquish her powers willingly to Vuk, who reveals her plan to destroy humanity and take over the planet. However, Scott arrives just in time to save Jean. Things take a drastic turn when the control unit arrives, tranquilizing all the mutants and capturing them. The mutants are put on a train to a containment facility. Charles seizes the opportunity to persuade Eric and Hank to stop their violent hatred for Jean, reminding them that Raven wouldn't have wanted it. The Dabari then attack the train, aiming to get Jean back. The mutants are freed, but the Dabari start killing soldiers. The mutants fight back, with Selene and Ariki dying in the process. Kurt, Eric, Storm, and Hank make good use of their powers to destroy most of the attackers. Vuk, now even more powerful, arrives to claim Jean, and none of the mutants can hold her back. Charles reaches Jean and helps her wake up. She protects the mutants, destroying the train in the process. Vuk attempts to take the rest of Jean's powers, but Jean willingly gives them to her, realizing it is overwhelming Vuk. The energy from this process causes Scott to start disintegrating. Vuk warns Jean that she can't kill her without harming the others. Jean then pulls Vuk above Earth and obliterates her there, sending a blast that causes Jean to vanish, leaving behind a flaming phoenix in the sky. Later, the Academy is renamed Jean Grey's School for Gifted Youngsters. Hank becomes the new dean, Storm takes up a teaching position, and Peter has recovered from his injuries. Charles retires and heads to Paris, where he is found by Eric. Eric offers to play a game of chess with Charles, who initially declines but agrees after Eric says he wants to do for Charles what he did for him many years ago: save his life and give him a home. They begin playing, and the final shot shows a flaming phoenix soaring through the sky. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please follow or subscribe, and don't forget to like, share, and comment. Your support means everything and helps me create more great content.